Hi, thank you for taking the time to listen to this video. I'm Chief Randy Brice with the Queen Creek Police Department. From the very beginning of this process, this has all been about getting justice for Preston. Arrests were not enough. We needed to get to indictments and successful prosecution. Thanks to the bravery of the many who stood up and spoke out, we have 7 individuals that are being charged with first-degree murder, among other charges. Safety and security in Queen Creek is a top priority. First, we want to recognize the bravery of the individuals who came forward with providing tips and information and witness statements. In recent days, there have been some follow-up questions regarding the investigative process, how and why we released information that we did, and what the next steps might look like. I'm here to answer those questions for you today. When it comes to the release of records, we are legally required to release parts of police records that include reports, CAD data, recorded calls for service, video, and so on. There are limitations on what we can actually redact. This is not just a Queen Creek requirement, this is a requirement for all public agencies in Arizona. While victim names are redacted, witness names are not redacted. However, I do want to point out it is typically QCPD's procedure to redact juvenile names in all categories in an effort to protect juveniles. In this case and release, we are aware of a small number of juvenile names that have not been redacted. During the investigation and the report, there are some dates at birth that were not known or documented. As such, it did not trigger the allowable redactions during the redaction process. As your chief, I'm evaluating processes and taking steps to mitigate this in the future. I also want to take a moment to address questions about tips, and specifically distinguishing between anonymous and those where the tipster self-identifies. If a name is provided to the police department during an investigation and it does not meet one of the approved exceptions, it is required by law to be released through the public records process. On QCPD's tip site, there is specific instructions that contact info should be left blank if the tipster would like to remain anonymous. However, moving forward, as we continue to use partner sites, we will evaluate if their site can be more explicit about the process. I am aware that these two aspects of the law can make some uncomfortable when it comes to public records. I also understand the concern community members have when participating in police investigations. I want to let you know that I'm in the process of communicating these concerns through our elected officials to the state legislature, to see if something can be done with the law going forward to ensure transparency while also promoting public safety for those who come forward to help solve crimes. To date, we have not received any calls for service for threats. So please, if you are threatened, report it immediately to the appropriate agencies so that they can investigate. For those that have already communicated their concerns, we hear you and we understand your frustration, and we will continue to work with you to address your concerns. In an effort to be fully transparent, in recent records release, the Queen Creek Police Department released a series of audio files that included 911 calls and also non-emergency calls that came into the call center during and around the time of the attack. These audio files included a time period between 9 p.m. and 10 p.m. on October 28, 2023. As you look at this graphic, we'll start at the top where it says Queen Creek Ranchettes before the attack. The initial call, and let me be very clear, is we received one call for service, as I've said from the beginning, one call for service prior to the attack in the neighborhood of the Queen Creek Ranchettes. That call came in at 9:06 p.m. and then the officers were later dispatched at 9:09 p.m. and 37 seconds and arrived at 9:20 p.m. and 3 seconds. There was a second call that was received by the communication center at 9:12 p.m. but was not dispatched because officers were already en route to the area. As you move down the graphic to the bottom, this is the part where we wanted to be fully transparent about everything that was going on in that particular area related to parties between 9 and 10 p.m. Also because this particular location and set of calls has been repeatedly confused with the situation that occurred in the Queen Creek Ranchettes and related to the Preston Lord attack. As you move down the graphic to the Villa de Arboles area, this is another party that occurred about a mile to mile and a half away, but was not directly related to the attack. On the Villa de Arboles call for service, or series of calls, we first arrived in the area at 8:34 p.m. after a call that came in at 8:24 p.m. on the non-emergency line. Subsequent to that, while the officers were on scene, we received 7 additional calls, including 2 911 and 5 non-emergency calls. These calls for service, those 7 audio files that were released with this records release, were not related to the attack involving Preston Lord and were not in the area of the Queen Creek Ranchettes. They are continually being confused, and that's why we are providing them in this context. As you move back up to the center of the graphic, this is when we received the subsequent call in the Queen Creek Ranchettes where Preston was attacked. The initial call that came in after the one and only call that we received in that area came in at 9:49 p.m. to the call center. Officers were dispatched at 9:51 and 17 seconds and then arrived at 9:55 and 29 seconds with a 3-minute and 33-second response time. We received multiple 911 calls for service. 5 are listed there on the graphic. And again, we arrived at 9:55 p.m. I'm so proud of the tenacity and dedication of the QCPD team. I'm also proud of the hundreds of people who have come forward to help us with tips and other information. I want to reiterate that the Queen Creek Police Department and the town of Queen Creek is committed to the safety of this community, and we will continue to be part of the solution, especially for our youth. We have an amazing community that continues to come together when it matters, and together we can create and enhance a culture of unity that condemns violence. Thank you for your time today.